So this is going to be a rapid fire Q&A of commonly asked questions that I get in regards to UX design, breaking in, learning, interviewing, and anything else that I feel would be beneficial for you. So for some context, I currently do mentor for UX design on Mentor Cruise. I've helped people get into Amazon, Google, and Meta, and myself, I did work at Amazon and do have my current full-time job here in New York City. And I do have a newsletter where I share more UX design tips that I'll put in the description box down below. Feel free to use the timestamps or the timeline to skip around. And without further ado, let's jump into the questions. The first question is, what is the difference between UX design and UI design? It's a very common question. I got it too. And essentially, I think of UX design kind of being like the skeleton of the human body, while UI design is like your background of how you appear to other people. UX design is kind of like writing an essay. And what I mean by that is when you are writing an essay, think about all the content you're taking, how you're structuring that content, how the types of examples that you're using to pull it in, how are you framing your argument when you're writing this essay. So that's UX design. On the flip side, UI design is taking that same essay, but then using it as a speech in front of a crowd. And then the way that your voice sounds, the tone of voice, the speed, your cadence, I guess the richness of your voice too is all UI design, which naturally carries UX, but how it's experienced to the other side is UI design. So I hope that makes sense. That's an example that I try to use when I'm explaining it to my mentees, so hopefully that clears some things up for you as well. Moving on is, do I need a formal UX education to get started? And my answer for that is no, you don't, but I do highly recommend it for the sake of there being a more surefire way of having that structure already laid out in front of you. And it's more this thing of if you're switching fields and you're new to this field, you just don't know what you don't know already, and having the set course of already set modules, maybe they have mentors, side support, and already having like a set structure in front of you can just make it easier for you to go throughout specific learning processes and not have to scramble out to even figure out what is the best way to learn about it, or scramble to figure out how to even learn about it, managing that yourself versus just going through the modules and just making progress. And instead of spending time of how you're going to learn on your own, you're better spending that time just making progress in terms of learning. And how you learn, there's a bunch of different options. Maybe you self-teach, maybe it's a course, maybe it's a master's program or a boot camp. There's so many different factors. I think if you do want to dip your toes in, you could take like a free course. I think Coursera does have one. I'm not sure about Google Certificate, but I do know that is a more affordable option. But I would say if you are new to UX and want to learn more about UX, I definitely would recommend that the boot camp or whatever course you're taking should last at least about 3 to 4 months. I just imagine if I was new, knowing the things that I know now, it would be a much harder to make significant progress in learning UX and creating a proper portfolio if it is less than that time frame. And as some of you may know, I personally went the UX bootcamp route at Springboard. I took it during 2020, 2021, and that has helped me work at Amazon as well as get an interview at places like IBM as well as Meta, which helps me make my portfolio to eventually work in big tech and have my current full-time job now. Personally, I did think it was a good investment. It just gave me the structure to make my portfolio from scratch because I didn't really know what I was doing. Various tools that you can have, but if you did want to go the bootcamp route at Springboard, I do know that bootcamps are expensive, so if you did want to go the Springboard bootcamp route, feel free to use my code Sharon Kim and you can get $1,000 off your tuition. But I will leave that option in the description box down below for you to check out. Moving on to the next question, say if you are to go that bootcamp route, how can you then find a good mentor? I've seen the posts on Reddit, I've seen like other comments that your mentor experience can really influence your bootcamp experience too. So how can you kind of like ensure you have a good teacher? And personally, what I did is that whatever mentors that they advertise on their website, whatever bootcamp it is, I would specifically request those mentors. And I remember when I was going throughout my application process, I did list out a specific mentor. He did work at Google. And the second critical thing is really opening up my schedule to be as free as possible just to make sure our availabilities can match. And back then I did take some time off of school to do so. My availability open like 24/7. So even if the only time available was on like a Friday at 3 a.m. in the morning, I was very willing to make that time investment. So that's something I would do if you're trying to find a good mentor within a course or a bootcamp. And on the side, while I'm saying all these things, I did come up with a new newsletter just to have more touch points about different advices that I would give to my mentees. So feel free to sign up in my description box down below. And moving forward, how long do you think it takes to transition into a UX career? And I would say it takes about on average 6 months to on the longer end 2 years. And it also depends on how new you are, how much experience you have in terms of visual design. Have you taken any graphic design classes in the past? I do think it's more rare to fully switch in a matter of 6 months or less, especially if you're coming from no design experience, but it is possible. It's just a lot more rare. Realistically speaking, I would give it at least a year to a year and a half. Plus, I know there was like layoffs last year and everything, and I just want to be very frank, it's not just a UX thing of how easy it is if you want to switch careers. For any industry, I really think you should not switch if you're not willing to go all in, because it is very difficult. It doesn't matter if you're going into finance or medicine or UX design. But I know for a lot of people, including myself, considering the salary jumps and better work-life balance, even with how difficult it is in general to switch career, I still thought it was worth it, but I do feel like that is something to keep in mind if you are considering the transition. So no, you do not need to know how to code if you're in UX design, but I do highly recommend it, and it will help you stand out from other applicants. First is to show you can just speak the same language as a developer. And I actually found that it did help make me a better designer if I'm passing off to designs which have to land in a developer's hands eventually. Even small things like just knowing what a div is, you had an advantage versus somebody who doesn't know what that means. And the second thing is, to my previous point of being just so many new people trying to get into UX design, having those like 3-4 languages in your resume of I know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, I feel like it's going to make a recruiter more comfortable passing you along and make you seem as more competent because you know how to work with other people and developers in this whole UX design process. So I do highly recommend it. Even if you're just starting, what I used to do is type in stuff like learn coding or learn HTML in 20 minutes or so. I would watch like 3 of those videos back to back just to get like a gist of, okay, I kind of see why coders or people who know how to code think in this way. You don't even need to show a full coding project within your portfolio, but it's really to show recruiters that you understand how developers think and can work easier with them. Moving on, and I think this is going to be the most valuable, is I get questions of how can I self-teach UX? I can make a whole other video about this, but I think if you want to self-teach UX, definitely binge watch as many YouTube videos as you can, as I'm sure you're already doing, for example, watching this video. But beyond that, taking like free mini courses just to understand the general process. But beyond that, the kicker is reinvest or invest that financial investment you would have put into a course or bootcamp and invest that into 1 or 2 UX design mentors. For example, if you were to take a bootcamp, I'm just using this because this is what I've done. These bootcamps could be like anywhere from $1,000 to like $12,000. For easy numbers, let's just say $10,000. $10,000 for bootcamp, which of course is a really big investment. But I think if instead you don't spend $10,000, but you spend like $3,000 to $4,000 on one-on-one calls weekly with a mentor who works at big tech or works at a company you really want to work at, not only do you get one-on-one more help, but then besides working on them to create a structure or plan for you to transition, I really think just having that mentorship aspect of someone really guiding you through that process to make sure your portfolio is in tip-top shape. And in a nutshell, that is something that I would do if I had to self-teach UX. Reinvest the money you would have put into a bootcamp or a class or master's and invest it into really good mentors. This is also why I've been mentoring on Mentor Cruise. Maybe you have a variety of different mentors, but the overall point is having one-on-one guidance with structure and accountability with a mentor or a tutor. The next is, and to piggyback on to the previous section, then what is the difference between say like a big tech portfolio versus what you'd see in a very cookie cutter like bootcamp portfolio? And I think it really depends on just the depth and the complexity of the problem. For example, it was like one of the really popular boot camps. I don't know if they can still do this, but it was a very cookie cutter project of creating a shopping app or like a new e-commerce app, which is very overdone and you should not go that route. But on the flip side, I'm totally making this up. If you are to create a more big tech worthy portfolio, I think tackling a very unique problem, for example, like using AR or voice design to help those who are blind or deaf, is a much more complicated problem, but then it can also create more thorough solutions if you do it properly. Of course, creating designs for a new space like that is so much more difficult, but if you do it well, then that is going to make your project stand out so much more. Of course, getting to that level is super hard, so if you had to choose between the two, I would tone it down. It doesn't have to be that ambitious, but do whatever the highest level of complexity you can really well versus overshooting and under delivering on the final designs. And on the side, for a future video idea, I am planning to review portfolios. So if you would like me to review your portfolio for free and I can post it on my channel, feel free to link your portfolio website in my Google sign up form in the description box down below. And it could be a good exposure for you as a designer as well. The next topic is very relatable, and it's how do you get experience when you need experience to get experience? I remember seeing on LinkedIn someone made this cycle of like, it's a very cylindrical of wanting experience, but you need experience to get experience, and then it's just keeps going on into like a vicious cycle. And I think when you're at that beginning stage, so creating first a really stellar portfolio and then afterwards just really applying as much as you can and sending cold messages, cold emails, and DMs on LinkedIn. Especially if you're new to the field, you have like no line of defense to really get your foot into the door besides you, your resume, and your portfolio. You can do all these like LinkedIn, whatever networking hacks, but if people finally look at your portfolio and it's just like not impressive, there is no use in doing all that extra work. I just feel like it's untimely to do all the extra networking things when your priority should be just creating the best absolute work that you can as a designer. And after you have that portfolio, it's really just a matter of applying as much as you can until one sticks. You do not need 3 interview yeses. You don't even need 2. Honestly, at the end of the day, all you need is 1 yes, 1 interview, 1 offer just to get your foot in the door to get started. Because after you get your foot in the door, because you built up so much more momentum and you have that first experience now, it'll be so much easier to get to the next job experience afterwards. My brother applied over 200 times for his current position. I applied countless times too. I know other designers who applied well over 100 times to get to their current positions. So it's not just like you and your portfolio and you're just not good enough to get into it, but it really is just a numbers game, and try not to take applying for so many jobs personally. The next is, if you're doing your portfolio, how can I get better at UI design? And I really think it's, if you want to get better at UI design, just study graphic design more. All I think what UI design is, graphic design distilled into a digital screen. So take a step back beyond just the app screen space and study graphic design. There's this YouTube channel that I loved watching all the time when I was learning UI, and it's called The Future. They did other topics, for example, of grid method, of typography rules, of designing posters, and even learning and seeing other people design posters and how they're laying stuff out. That kind of sense of visuals and graphics does translate into your eventual apps or website designs. Specifically, learning grid theory, typography, color theory, learning contrast, designing posters are really good ways to improve your UI design skills. And on the side, Dribbble is a fantastic site to get more UI inspiration to see how you can configure your UX design. And the last thing is, you can try to recreate your favorite app design screens from Uber or Google Maps within Figma. And then that can really help you get attuned to the very specific details of how they're spacing out, say their icons, how they're laying certain things out on top of each other, and that can help you gain a better sense for UI. Moving forward to say the interview portions of UX design, what are common interview questions that you can be asked? And also very common questions I hear my friends being asked when they're doing interviews. First is, why do you want to work here? Showing interest in the company, that you've done their research, and showing how your projects or work experience align to their company mission. Second is, what inspired you to do this project? Showing your motivations. Is it just a default project or project prompt that a bootcamp or a class gave you? Or did you dive in deeper and took more inspiration from personal problems that you had in your life? What other design solutions did you consider before choosing this final design solution? Why did you decide that this was the absolute best? So this question is to show that you didn't just take that first thought in mind and went along with it for final, but you really try to consider as many solutions as possible and considering what is the best solution out of all the possibilities. What was the most challenging part of this project? It shows that you are reflective and you can think back to not just doing the UX process for the sake of doing it, but that you really thought about in depth with how these different processes, and more than that, how you creatively try to handle that challenge to move on to the next step. Another way and a more aggressive way to ask that question is, tell me about a time you were proven wrong about a design decision and what did you do about it? I've actually been asked this question. It is a bit more intense, but that is just another way to show, like, how are you not afraid to scrap designs if they're actually not solving the problem and moving forward to find the best solution. Another reflective question, if you had more time, what would you expand upon further or redo? And other reflective questions include, if you could redo this project, what would you do differently? Or if you had more time, what would you expand upon or iterate further with this project? project. And it's to show you're always trying to continuously improve your work as a designer. The next question is how to overcome anxiety or have more self-confidence when it comes to interviewing or presenting during interviews. Definitely so common, and I think it's even, no matter if you've done 5, 10, or 15 interviews, that feeling of nervousness will never truly go away. I think it's just a sign that it means you want to do well in that interview, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I really think humanizing the interviewer, knowing that they've been in your shoes before of interviewing other people and everything. No one truly likes interviewing. Sometimes we just have the roles of, we have to ask you these questions as a recruiter, as a UX designer, to see if you're a good fit for our team. Especially not even for the UX portfolio review, but even for whiteboard challenges, I try to approach it as if I'm just having a conversation with them rather than them trying to trip me up in asking about my design decisions. They're not asking me, tell me a time you were proven wrong, because they're trying to intimidate me, although that question is very intimidating, but rather they're just curious about challenges that I've been through and what did I do about it. And even for whiteboards, if it's not a conversation, I also try to act as if they hired me as a consultant and I'm in that position where I'm trying to give them advice about whatever design challenge that they're currently going through. So the next time you have an interview, I would also try to treat it as a conversation with another designer and they're just curious about your process. And the last main question is, are connections necessary to get a job within UX design, and how can you stand out in comparison to other applicants within this field? As with everything, there is no hard set yes or no, but for this one, I will say that having connections is really going to put you at an advantage. In a previous video of UX design in 2024, I forgot the exact statistic, but although referrals come up about 7% within the total applications, of that 7%, 43% actually pass into the final rounds or are actually accepted. So with that, if you don't know anyone, I also used to not know anybody too, DMing people directly on LinkedIn, sending them personalized messages or emails, offering to buy people coffee, offering to buy people lunch near their workplace is all like easier ways of how can you provide value for this person. Maybe it's not even I'll take on extra design work, but I will really compensate you for your time. I'll get you a coffee, and really just sending personalized messages to people to show that you care about their work, that you want to connect with them and build relationships with them. Try not to approach it as being so transactional. And even when I connect with new UX designers or even UX design content creators, I try to approach it as I'm just making new friends within my field instead of connections. But I also find it to be a more fun way to have this work-life balance. So these were my answers to most commonly asked questions that I receive as a UX mentor, and hopefully it is helpful to those who are new or interested in getting into the UX design field. Again, I do have a newsletter where I share out more UX portfolio tips and career tips, which I'll leave in the description box down below for you to sign up. Also, feel free to put your portfolio in the link I'll put in the description box as well. So do let me know if you have any other questions down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and until next time, bye!